Hey everyone, quick little announcement here from Fishing the DMV. Our Weekend Warrior Club membership on Patreon is nearly full. There are only 12 membership spots still available. Once these spots are gone, they're gone, and I'll be closing the club to any new members until 2026. At that point, you can try to join again, but it'll be at a higher rate. So get your rates locked in now, and you'll gain access to our 5 fishing tournaments each year for Patreon members only, 5% off your orders to Jake's Bait and Tackle, 10% off your order to Tiger Crankbaits, 10% off your orders to Catoctin Creek Rods. You'll gain access to our private Facebook group community, loads of members only content, and of course, ad-free, commercial-free episodes of the show. You get all this for $6 a month, which is less than a pack of Cincos or a jackhammer chatterbait. Lock in these rates now because in 2026, I'm going to be increasing the rate to new members. And again, I'll give you throw in an extra one here. I'll give you 8% off if you buy the membership for the year. So that'll be $66 for all of this value. There are only a few spots left, so hurry up and check out the link in the episode description. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Ahrens. Today, I have a really special guest. I have Pete Robinson, and you all know him. And I really going to approach this like I did with the Jody and the Strikel, where it's just conversation. And fishing is going to get thrown in there too. But there's always stories behind people and how they get to where they are. And Pete, you have a bunch of them.
I think I do. Well, first of all, Thomas, thank you for having me today. It's really a pleasure to be here. Anytime I get to tell my stories and talk fishing is a good time. I feel like for people who don't know me, I'm a senior writer at Bassmaster. I write for just about every publication out there. I'm obsessed with bass fishing like all of you are. My wife and I also have a travel business, and I feel like I represent the everyman out there. You know, I'm never going to be a multi-millionaire, but I'm a regular bass club guy who's living the dream, who's gotten out there to fish with Van Dam. I've gotten to go pop for tuna in Panama. I feel like if I can do it, anyone else can do it. So, you know, light it up. Tell me what you want to know about and what I can share with your audience.
Well, really, I mean, to put a timeline to this bad boy, like, how did you get into fishing and really your career in law? How did all that get started?
I'll try to condense it. Come from a family where no one fishes. I had distant cousins who fished, who I never met, who like literally died the year I was born. But dad and some other dads every summer when I was starting maybe 5 or 6 years old would charter a boat on the Chesapeake, go fishing for bluefish. And I remember other people could stop and eat lunch and I couldn't stop. Like once I was there, it was a zone. Like I couldn't stop. I was obsessed with everything about it. So being from sort of the geeky, nerdy, bookie family, dad for my 9th birthday gets me a subscription to Field and Stream, and I become obsessed with it. So like 30 years later to write for Field and Stream is bringing everything else full circle at that point. So, you know, I fish here and there. I have a friend who has a farm out in Loudoun County. I go to Minnesota a couple summers, but I'm really not into it. And then I'm in law school in New York City in 1994. And I'm home for the summer, and there's a Bassmaster Invitational on the Potomac River. And I'm like, I'll go over to Smallwood and check it out. I don't know what this is really all about. And I go over, and I was amazed by it because you go to any other sporting event, football game, basketball game, you're not getting near Michael Jordan. You're not getting near Jaden Daniels or any of those people. Like the pros were there interacting with the fans. And I just watched. Like I had read about some of these guys in Bassmaster, but I think at that point I'd been in a bass boat once or maybe twice in my life. So this is, again, kind of dating myself. So I'm in law school at this point. I go back. It's the early days of email. Like I had an email account through law school, but I checked it like once a week. But I was so impressed with this Bassmaster event that I sent an email to their public relations department just saying, this was amazing. This was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. And Ann Lewis, who was the head of public relations at Bass at the time, sends me back an email, and we start going back and forth. And she says, you know, by the way, you're going to be moving back to D.C. next year to practice law. One of our best amateur fishermen in the Bassmaster events is a guy named Bill Roberts, who's a lawyer in Washington. So I call him up, and it's, you know, Mr. Roberts, I would like to learn to fish. Could you please take me fishing someday? And Bill, that summer I was studying for the bar exam, and I get a call one day, And it's, hey, I bet you need to take some time off from studying for the bar. And I'm like, I don't know who this is, but you're absolutely freaking right. And it was Bill. And he took me fishing, and he became a mentor really in life, in fishing, in a lot of different things. He was one of the groomsmen of my wedding. He's still one of my best friends. He's retired from the practice of law now. He spends half the year in Williamsburg and half the year in New Hampshire at Lake Winnipesaukee. And he was a really good amateur fisherman, made the nationals, came very close to making the Bassmaster Classic. And he also knew a lot of the pros. So through him, I got to know people like O.T. Fears and Terry Baxay and David Wharton and Chet Dothett. And we used to go back in the days of the invitationals. We would go down like to Rayburn, and we would practice with the pros for 3 days and then just go home because they were allowed to practice with anyone. So I got to meet Denny Brower through him, Randy Dearman through him, all these people, and it just kind of snowballed from there. So I kind of went off on a tangent there. I don't know if you had a question, a follow-up.
No, I mean, the biggest thing is, why law? I mean, to do New York, I mean, you know the old cliche about doctors and lawyers, like it is all consuming, really. And you had a passion for that, but then you also had a passion for writing too.
I don't know that I had a passion for law, and I don't mean, when people ask me today, should my kid go to law school? My first question is always, do they want to be a lawyer? Because I kind of I'm very proud of my career. I've practiced law for over 30 years now. And wow. I've done a lot of really cool things, and I'm proud of what I've done. But I did it because it was what was expected of me. Like people told me, like in my family, you went to law school or you went to medical school. My brother, who makes like 20 times as much money as I do, went to business school, and that was considered like a radical thing to get an MBA. So I did it. And I mean, that's one of the things. When I started my writing career, I realized it's okay to be passionate about the work you do. I come home every day, and I'm not excited about every writing assignment, but I'm always excited to sit down and write about fishing.
How hard was that for you?
How hard was what?
Mentally, to tell yourself it's okay to do the thing that you like. Because the writing thing evolved very naturally. Like the first time I got a check for writing something about fishing, it felt like I was stealing. like people, I'll tell you a story about that. So I started writing, and I made a few $100s here and there, whatever. And then I won a federation tournament on the Potomac, and cool. I think I won $1,200, something like that. It was, at the time, it was the most I'd ever won in a tournament. And I got invited by FLW to go to the Forest Wood Cup in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And so I'm out there with, through my friend Bill, I had breakfast with Randy Hopper and Keith Daffrin, who were then with Ranger, and Forrest and Nina Wood. And we're sitting at the breakfast table, and all the guys are kind of talking. So I'm talking to Mrs. Wood. And I said, I'm ready to get engaged to my now girlfriend, but I got to save for the engagement ring. And she said, well, how are you doing that? And I said, well, I made $400 for an article I wrote, and I won $1,200 in this tournament. She goes, well, how much do you have saved up? And I said, $1,600, $1,200 and $400. But it felt like when I realized, I just remember saying to myself, if I just sell one article a month for $250 or $300, I can pay off that ring really fast. And realizing that you could get paid to do something you like to do. And on top of that, again, using sort of the basketball and football examples, like I feel very fortunate that fishing was my passion, because if golf had been my passion, I was never going to end up in the golf cart with Tiger Woods. Mm-hmm. I was never going to end up shooting free throws or going to Burger King with LeBron James. But like to get to practice with Van Damme for 3 days, or to get to ride with Denny, or to have those guys' phone number and be able to call them up with a question, whether it was for an article or just because I had a question about fishing, again, for lack of a better term, it feels like stealing. It feels like I found the cheat code to life to get to do what I want to do and get to talk to the best people in the world at it. What was that? What was the moment really that you had that this is going to be potentially a career or supplemental income, when you got to do stuff with Field and Stream? Or do you have a vivid memory of like that moment in your head, like, okay, this is working. It's going to work.
I want to say it's around 2010. That was the first classic I was invited to work for Bass. And I've worked every classic since then, except for the last Ray Roberts one. I had to be out of town for that one. But it was back in the pre-live days. And it was me and James Overstreet, who in my opinion is the greatest fishing photographer who ever lived. And I got to spend, 4 days in the boat, practice day and 3 tournament days with Overstreet. And we would get a call, Van Dam is in the back of Beeswax Creek, go there. And it was like the Red Sea would part. All the spectator boats would move aside and we would be the boat closest when this historical moment happened, when Van Dam caught his winning fish, when Chris Lane caught his winning fish, when Casey Ashley caught his winning fish. I said, this thing that's so incredibly important to me, I'm the closest person to history being made. And I have the news before anyone else has the news. I don't know how to describe it. And the split was really hard for me because I had spent all this time building contacts with the Elite Series pros, and then they all left for BPT. And because I'm not out on the road all the time, I don't necessarily know the new guys as well, but now I have a new challenge to build up relationships with all these 25-year-old live scopers and get them to consider me their go-to guy who they'll call when they have a question.
How has technology on your end changed? Because, going from pre-social media to now Twitter, X being one of the bigger outlets, just digital stuff in general, has it... I guess your job has evolved more than anything, because I would say print's not dead. It's niche now, so to speak.
It's close to dead. We have Bassmaster, we have Bass Times. I write for both of those, but it's never going to be the iconic moment in a kid's life now when he gets his Bassmaster magazine. It's, I'm on the board of the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. We always joke who's going to be the first YouTuber to make it into the Hall of Fame. And obviously AI is changing that too. I can say I feel, again, lucky. I found the hole in the donut. As I was getting into writing, all the sort of senior writers at Bass, the Steve Price, the Louis Stouts, the Don Worths, they were starting to do less and less. And this new generation, it's hard to find someone who really wants to be a writer. So I have, in my opinion, more to do than ever before. It's just, it takes different forms. It's ghostwriting for pros. It's advertorial work. It's writing captions for a photo gallery, things like that. I don't get to do as much of the, 3,000 word expose long form journalism as I'd like to do. But, just like the pros have to adjust to the technology that's out there, as a writer or a communicator, you have to figure out a way. What you're doing now is a perfect example of that. You are telling the news as it happens in a YouTube or podcast type format. And I have to adjust to that.
And it is interesting because the idea of the podcast or long form is there's no edit. You just have a conversation or debate and you're not going to clip it out. But compared to when I was a kid, none of that happened. Everything that you got were little snippets. Even I remember Bass because my brother fished the junior classic at the Battle of Pittsburgh at the Three Rivers there. And, they'd run the VHS and all that stuff. And now you can watch all of the highs, the lows live. And it's crazy how that has evolved how we ingest content, whether it is, the written word or visual.
Yeah. I think people have shorter attention spans in general, and it's a matter of figuring out. But yet I say that, yet here we are on an hour-long podcast talking, and people are going to tune in for the entire hour, as you know. So maybe it's not shorter attention spans. Maybe it's just the way that we consume longer pieces and the fact that we have more room for a lot of short pieces.
I feel like it's we have two ends of the spectrum now. We have the extremes. You have the TikTok generation, but you have the people that maybe grew up listening. I still listen to the baseball on the radio. I know I'm an old soul, but that longer form content, it's just segued over to the podcast realm where you can ingest specifically what you want to hear whenever you want to hear it.
Yeah. And the other thing, someone once told me you need to train your algorithm. Your algorithm is going to feed you only things that it thinks you're going to like. So sometimes go and look for different things. Look for things that are outside of your comfort zone, and it kind of brings you in. I think, one writer I was very much influenced by in the start of my writing career was Bill Simmons, who was with ESPN at the time. He was the Boston sports guy, and then he did 30 for 30. He did Grantland, the website.
I didn't know he did 30 for 30.
Yeah.
I didn't know he founded that. Wow.
And, his thing was viewing sports from sort of a fan's perspective and bringing in pop culture, relating it to the TV of the day. Fishing has a lot of room for that. There are musical interludes. There's pop culture references. I think that's one of the things that Zona and Tommy Sanders in particular did well. For all the complaining you hear about Bass Live, Did you ever think we would have 32 hours of tournament coverage in a weekend? It's hard to fill that up.
We truly don't appreciate how quickly technology is advanced. And like the scope comment, it's like you still got to take a step back and understand, like, this is insane technology we have. And I grew up, and I'm not that old, you didn't have live. And when Bass cracked the idea of like, we're going to do this live thing, and now everybody has it. It's insane. And that's in less than 10 years, I believe. Comment section helped me out. It's I know it's less than 15 years we've had live. It's crazy.
Yeah, and that's something that you got to give Mike McInnes a lot of credit for, and Mark Jeffries and Matt Pangrac before that doing some of their stuff. It was iterative, but I go back to the days of, in my lifetime, getting the tournament results a month later in Bassmaster Magazine. And then even to think back to like my early law firm days, I'm working at a law firm, and my friend Bill Roberts, who I mentioned, I would get the tournament results emailed to me from Bassmaster, I think. And I would fax them over to him back when we had fax machines, because I don't think he had an email account at that point, or he didn't check it, and then it went to getting the daily results from Bass Fan. Then it went to getting little snippets, and now every moment is live. I think of all the historical moments that we missed out on simply because you watch an old Bassmaster show. I love the old Bob Cobb Bassmaster shows. The music gets me fired up, but it's 22 minutes. You might get 3 minutes of the winner from a whole tournament. And now you get 3 minutes of the winner in the first 3 minutes of the show. It's just amazing how far we've come.
And I mean, I guess a two-part question here, because the first part is like, you're able to connect moments that you probably wouldn't when you have a pre-edited thing. And I'll always remember when Carl Jopkinson won on 10 Killer. And he caught the fish that he knew he won, and we didn't know at the time. But he's trying to get a house and everything else, and he just starts crying in the boat. Like, I've waited my whole life to catch that fish, and we watched that live. And I just remember like how Zona and all them, like, it was just this somber moment. But it's like, you don't get that usually when it's pre. It's a you have to be there kind of thing, which was fascinating to me. But on the side note, with what you do, is when information is so instantaneous, do you feel like you have to do different things nowadays to keep what you're doing lively and fresh when you're updating everyone on what's going on?
I do. I think where Bass can do better and where I can do better is because we're seeing what they're doing in real time. There's no hiding your lure anymore. There's no hiding your pattern. There's probably not much hiding where you're fishing. I know, a lot of the old guys complain, well, we go to Lake Fork now, and I see all the young guys on my spots because they saw it on YouTube or on Bassmaster. I don't know if that's true or not, but in order to be a real sport and in order for people to care about it, we have to care about the people who are doing it. So what I can do is give you more insight into who a Kyle Patrick is or who a Trey McKinney is, what drives them, why is the next Carl Jocumsen crying at this moment? You kind of need to know that either in front or after the fact, what caused that emotional breakdown, because I think that's what we all relate to. We're a little different than most sports insofar as we're a participatory sport. I think most people who follow the sport fish, or if not competitively, then at least recreationally. But you still want, what matters is, in terms of watching them as professionals, is caring about who they are.
Mm-hmm. No, I 100% agree with that. It's fascinating too, because like with social media, there's always this tendency to feed the algorithm, trying not to use the cliche terms here. And so you can write or create content that is a certain way because it's going to get the clicks, it's going to push it. But then it's like, you feel sometimes like it's empty calories, I guess, for lack of a better word, because we could talk about forward-facing sonar. If it was baseball, we could talk about scandals. How do you try to keep from falling into that trap of just doing what the algorithm says will work, even though it's like, no, I don't want to do that every time?
I mean, I always joke, historically, I tried to resist the story of how to fish a spinnerbait in the spring. I don't think that's a story anymore because no one does that, except maybe me. But certain articles have been written 1,000 times, right? Mm-hmm. There's only so many ways you can write about how to fish a jig and minnow. And it's probably be seen better on YouTube. But when I pitch stories to my editors, I try to answer questions that I have as a fisherman. When they're a technique. How do I catch cruising bass? How do I catch bass that are shallower than I can get because they're up in parking lots or in flooded buckbrush way back in there, something like that. Something that I can't figure out. And one of the things that, this is sort of a tangent to your question. My wife and I started our website about fishing travel. I said, what are the questions I want to know? If I'm going on XYZ airline, can I take hooks in my carry-on? What's the longest rod tube they'll allow me to take? How do I navigate this airport? How do I navigate customs? What bass lures will work for tuna? And rather than trying to feed the algorithm, I tried to answer a question, and I felt like the algorithm takes care of itself.
How did you go, again, this is another part of your portfolio, decide that I also, in my busy schedule, want to start booking fishing trips for people? Like it's really cool, but it's an interesting story and how that came to be.
So when I was in my 20s, I was convinced I was going to be the next Kevin Van Dam. I was fishing local events, like BFL and below level events. There was no chance I was going to be any part of Kevin Van Dam. But, I wanted to be a bass tournament fisherman, and I didn't care where I was going or when I was going, as long as there was competition involved and I was in my little metal flake bass boat. 40th birthday, 2009, my wife takes me to Lake El Salto, Mexico. We have a great trip. Then 2 years later, we go with friends to Brazil for peacock bass. Then we go for peacock bass again. And then we just start going to El Salto a lot. Starting in 2013, we started going like twice a year. I had kind of given up on the tournament thing. I was doing more writing. And I said, with limited time to fish, I want to go to the best places at the best times and fish. So I had and still have a blog on the Yamamoto website. And I was just started writing articles about going to Mexico just for the hell of it. I'm like, here's how we caught him in Mexico. Here's 3 lures I wish I had brought to Mexico. And I get a call one day from the owner of the lodge. And he's like, I want you to do my social media. And I want you to write my fishing reports, call my clients. So we start going there even more regularly at that point. And then in 2016, the owner decides he wants to have an all women's trip. And at that point, we had gotten to know him pretty well. His name is Billy Chapman, a great guy. And so he enlists my wife, Hannah, with the task of organizing this women's trip. And we figured it'd be easy. We'll give $500 off, come down to El Salto, drink margaritas, catch big bass. It was the biggest pain in the ass you can imagine.
Really?
I don't know why we couldn't convince women to go. I don't know if they didn't trust us or they were afraid of Mexico or what. But we ended up filling a trip of like 16 people, I think, because we expanded it to couples. So we had a bunch of couples come. And at that point, we kind of saw the light where my wife said, I can do this. I can book trips to Mexico. And so we made a proposal, and she started bringing groups down to Mexico. That's great. And around, I want to say 2018, 2019, I'm not burned out on bass fishing, but that'll always be my bread and butter. But I needed to try some other things. I needed to reinvigorate what it was that I loved about fishing in the first place. And I get invited to go to Alaska. And Keith Combs from Texas, he and I go to Alaska for a week and go to this lodge. And it's just awesome. I mean, we're catching trout and salmon out on these fly-in streams. And the next year is my 50th birthday. At this point, my wife had pretty much built up her Mexico booking business pretty well. And my parents, who are the least outdoorsy people you can imagine, they said, we want to take you someplace for your 50th birthday. We're like, well, we can't go to the jungle. We can't go. Oh, we'd been to Africa tiger fishing, but that's not going to happen. We'd been to Brazil. That's not going to happen. So we say a fishing trip, and they say, yes, we'll take you on a fishing trip, but it has to have a reasonable amount of creature comforts. So a friend recommended that we go to Guatemala, which is the best sail fishing in the world.
Really?
And so we go, it's like Mercedes Sprinter vans. The boat is 45 feet long with air conditioning, gourmet meals. My parents have a great time. I think we catch in 3 days, 37 sailfish, something crazy like that, which is considered subpar there to catch that many. And the next year, after that once-in-a-lifetime trip, we decided to go back. And we end up fishing with the owner of that lodge. And at the end, Hannah says, I want to work for you. I love this place so much. So we have a conference call with him and his wife. And suddenly we're booking sailfish trips to Guatemala. And so now we've been there 5 times. Meanwhile, I start doing some work for the Alaska Lodge. And we go COVID year to Alaska while everything's kind of shut down. And then we start booking trips there. It just like it naturally evolved. And then when I went to the Alaska Lodge, they had just hired a PR firm. And the guy at the PR firm knew nothing about fishing. But they treated me and Keith so well that I said, anything you want written for a magazine, a pamphlet, whatever, I'll write for this Alaska Lodge. So the PR guy who knows nothing about fishing pitches an article about salmon fishing in Alaska to a magazine aimed at marlin fishermen. And so the editor calls me up one day. He's like, well, this is not our normal deal, blah, 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 blah. And we start talking. He's like, I'll take it. If you'll do it for free, I'll take the article. So I sent it to him and he and I become friends. And then he says, you know what? So he and I, his name's Elliot Stark. He just wrote an amazing book on fishing travel. We start talking pretty regularly. And he's like, you need to bring some of your bass guys to Panama. They can all cast. They all love topwater baits. He goes, let's go down and catch some giant tuna on topwater baits. And so we got 8 friends to go to Panama. So now we have lodges. We end up working for that owner too. So we have lodges in Mexico, Guatemala, Alaska, and Panama. It just kind of happened organically.
Wow.
And again, like you remind me of myself in the best possible way. Like you're doing what you're doing because you love it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you can imagine how many opportunities you're going to have come in front of you organically just by being places, just by talking to people. Things just happen. People
it's funny
in this
though.
Industry want to help you.
It's funny because you also hear about how like AI will ruin everything and we'll lose the jobs, and no matter how there's this disconnect that's happening in corporate, but yet people crave human to human connection, and it's so funny how it's a circle and it comes back around to where there's that commodity that'll never go away about just talking to people and having a human to be with. And that, no matter what happens, business, life, whatever, it will never go away. Even in 1,000 years, I don't think that's ever going to go away.
And everyone has a story to tell. I mean, that's the magic of what you've done, is that you could do the same interviews with Van Dam and Skeet and Ike and Ellie, and I'm sure they would be great. But you found how many of these episodes have you done now? Would you guess?
400.
Like 400. So let's say 200 different people who have some relationship to fishing in this area, who have a story to tell, who have an expertise. And that story won't be lost because you did this. That's how I feel about my writing.
And that's what's so much fun about writing or talking about it. Even like, guys, when we were pre-recording this, I had Lynn's episode dropped, and he was like one of the first people to bring Megabass over, and he talked about the Forest Wood Cup, and like that's fascinating that people would take a risk on that. Like, oh, I think this jerkbait thing might take off. I don't know. It's like, oh my god, now you can look at it. It's crazy. Forest Wood Cup. That's something I miss, dude. Is that got lost with the MLF bass? I don't know. Divorce, rivalry, whatever you want to call it.
Zona calls it the jihad.
Yeah, the jihad. It's sad because I miss the Forest Wood Cup. And for some reason, editing Lynn's episode made me really nostalgic back for that summer. It's like the summer classic. You'd have bass in the spring, and then you'd have Forest Wood in the summer.
Yeah, I only went to one. I missed the one in Richmond, but I went to that one in Hot Springs, the one that Scott Suggs won for $1 million. And
it's nuts.
And it was cool because FLW just flew me in and said, do what you want to do. We don't expect any writing. So I just got to like hang with people in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and go to tackle shops and meet people. It was like 180 degrees there in the summer in Arkansas. But I like, for the average bass club guy, like I was saying about being there when Van Dam caught the winning fish, when Scott Suggs won $1 million, I was in the arena. And I think we've talked, I practice law. I have, if all goes right, a little over 2 years left before I will retire from the practice
Congrats.
of law. Thank you. and write full time. Like I always compare it to, do you know the movie Almost Famous?
Yep.
So riding the bus with Stillwater. At some point, I have to ride the bus and be there all the time. Like be there at every Elite Series event, even if it doesn't make me more money, because by being there, you get the stories. You really get the flavor of what's going on. You can smell what Lake Ouachita smells like when it's 110 degrees out. And to really be able to tell that story, you need to have been there.
No, I 100% agree with you. And that's in any life. You have to make a jump at some point, a leap of faith, if you will. And, and I'll be doing that too here eventually. And you're going to be doing it here too, going full time with this. But have you ever thought about, do you still dabble in bass fishing still?
I have a boat. I have a bass boat. The people at Bass Cat and Mare have been very good to me over the years. I probably fished.
You said you got burnt out, right?
I got burnt out on the tournament thing. When I realized that I wasn't going to put in work, I wasn't able to or willing to put in the work to take it to that next level as an angler. Suddenly you realize you've plateaued and this is what you're going to do. And, fishing around here is limited.
Agreed.
Because of the traffic, because of the waterways that we have some great fisheries, but I envy those guys who can go out and fish 2 tournaments a week on the Potomac all year long and be content with it. Like there's a lot of guys around here who are great sticks and that's what they love to do. I can't do that. I get into a rut of fishing the same creeks over and over again. And that's my fault. That's on me. But I kind of need to feed the beast and do different things at this point in my life. And our website, I don't know if I explained this, is called Half Past First Cast because we both reached 50 years old and said we're at least the halfway point of our lives. We better make the most of our remaining casts because each cast we take could be your last one at this point. You could live to be 60. You could live to be 90. But, I may never see Australia. I'm going to damn sure try to get there and go fishing for a month or 2. But
is that a new goal of yours? Because, we didn't even talk about, you caught a tiger bass. I didn't know they existed until I watched River Monster. So are you just trying to knock off as many different species as possible?
I think I would like that. I don't have a particular numerical goal, but I'm a topwater freak. I never realized how important visually fishing is to me. Like topwater for bass is great. Then you go and you catch peacocks on a big wood chopper and you're like, this is awesome. Then you go for sailfish and you see them up in the spread and they're doing like the windshield wiper with their bill and you're like, this is more visual. But the ultimate for me has been this tuna deal. You go there, you see the tuna, and this is where it comes full circle for me. You see on the radar on the boat, 3 miles away, there are birds diving on bait. And you can see them on the radar, and the captain says, hold on. And you're holding on for dear life, and he's going as fast as he can. And you get there, and there's literally acres of tuna blowing up. And you fire your popper in, and either you get bit, and you're hooked onto a giant tuna for a while, or sometimes you don't get bit, and all the fish go down suddenly. And then he goes, they're 3 miles away that way, and you have to run 3 miles that way. It reminds me of, if you ever remember the first tournament you fished, club tournament, BFL, whatever, where you thought you were on the winning fish, your first run of the morning to go there, and your heart is beating through your chest and you're excited. To do that all day long, casting for tuna, I remembered that same feeling that I had in 1995 when I was fishing my first club tournaments. And it made me love fishing again. It made me love bass fishing again because I said, here's what I appreciate that I have in my backyard on the Potomac River, that I can go out and catch bass in 1.5 foot of water that will crush a buzzbait or crush a frog. And it's not better than tuna fishing. It's not worse than tuna fishing. It's part of that whole spectrum. And I feel like as anglers, we put ourselves in a silo. I think you've probably heard guys say, fly fishing, that's stupid. Who would ever do that? Well, when I go out and fly fish in Alaska, it's cool. And the fly fishermen say, those bass fishermen with their glitter boats, they're just a bunch of hillbillies. It's okay to like it all. And it's okay to say a lot of our identities are as anglers. So when we don't know something about fishing, it feels emasculating in a way. And it's okay to say, I don't know. Show me. Tell me what I could do better. It's fun to go into something where you're surprised every time you do it.
Yeah, agreed. And the tribalism was interesting when I started this show. Again, if you live in this area, you guys aren't, that you're listening in, we have very few, what I'd say, big time tournament waters, the Potomac, the James, places like that. Lake Ann is not even considered like a BFL size water, even though it's a great fishery. But then when you think of the biodiversity, you have the largest estuary, I think, on the planet, the Chesapeake Bay, with everything there. You have muskie fishing that's premier. We have smallmouth waters all the way from the Susquehanna all the way down. So there's so many different tribes in this area. And it's interesting that if you're just a bass guy, I can see where you get burnt out, but when you realize that there's so much more out there, one day I'm going to get good enough with a fly rod that I can catch a carp on it, because that's something I've been told by so many guides. It's like a poor man's bonefish. It's awesome. It's like, I got to try that. So I envy you for doing this, because I don't know if I'd ever have the money or the bravery to fly to Africa to chase a tigerfish, but good Lord, that sounds like fun.
Oh, it was awesome. You had to fish off a pontoon boat, because if you fish out of a regular bass boat or John boat, the hippos will come and turn you over.
Oh my God.
But their mouths are so tough that I think for every 10 that we got to strike, we hooked 5 and caught 1 or 2. They're just so fast. We were throwing big, basically Mepps spinners and spoons, and you would feel them hit it, and suddenly your line would be 40 yards to the side. They were so fast.
Wow.
It was just cool. It's something different. I mean, and I think, one thing I certainly make a fine living, and I'm happy with the amount of money I make. Obviously we'd all rather make more, but you don't have to be Elon Musk or Bill Gates to go to Africa or to go to Alaska. I mean, I know plenty of people who fly to Alaska and tent camp around for a month, and you can catch fish off the side of the road. It's just a matter of what you want to do. And I think for a long time as a lawyer, I made excuses for myself. I can't do that because I have to focus on my career. I can't do that because they'll be mad if I take 2 weeks off in the middle of summer. At some point, you have to put yourself first. And
was that hard to do?
It's hard because you're taught. I think a lot of us are taught that our identity or our worth is in our job. I mean, for better or for worse, my wife and I don't have children, so it makes it easier for us to schedule things. But man, I wish that one of my nephews or nieces wanted to fish. I mean, I would love to take one of them to Alaska or Guatemala. I've offered. I took my nephew. We went to Detroit for a football game a few years ago, and I said, the kid has never fished. It was me, my brother, his kid who was 10 or 11, and his buddy who was 10 or 11. And I said, they've never fished. We're going to go to St. Clair. I know some guides up there. We're going to go trolling for muskies. So my nephew's first fish at 10 or 11 years old is a 46-inch muskie. And he's literally back to playing Madden on his phone like 2 minutes later. Like, it didn't register. And if I was 10 or 11, if someone had taken me muskie fishing, I would have been like out of my gourd excited. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I've explored this a little bit, but I feel like there's something, for lack of a better word, primitive in my brain. I've known since I was 6 years old, this is what I've wanted to do. Every aspect of it, from tackle to patterns to geography to forage, still fascinates me. And I hope everyone has something like that in their life. I mean, that's the one thing I always give my parents credit for, is that they had no interest in this, but they found a way to encourage my interest rather than trying to shoehorn me into the things that they liked.
It's so important to get kids, whether it's fishing, hunting in the outdoors, especially with, all the technology and how much screen time people are getting. It's something in our reptilian brain where we actually think we need that. We need to actually disassociate from our phones and get outside.
Absolutely. I mean, that's probably why I still have a bass boat at this point in my life, when I'm only fishing 20 or 30 days a year around home, because realistically it would be cheaper to hire a guide or call up a friend and go fishing with them. But there's just that random Friday or Saturday at some point in the year where I need 12 hours in the boat by myself. And my wife and I have a deal. Like, if I have a Friday off, I will leave the house at 4:30 or 5. I will text her a picture of the boat in the water with the caption, "I'm alive," to tell her that I made it to the river or the Lake Anna or wherever. And then I'll fish until I don't want to fish anymore. In the moment I don't want to be out there, that could be at 1 o'clock. It could be at 7 o'clock at night. The moment I don't want to be there, I go home. And that's kind of the one thing I do miss about tournament fishing, is that when you're tournament fishing, you want to stay out there. Right now, if I go out on the river and it sucks and it's 800 degrees or it's freezing cold and it's raining and I'm not on anything, it's too easy to say I can go home and write something and make some money or get a chore done. When you were tournament fishing, you would stay out there longer. And I kind of miss having that drive in that way, and you can't recreate that just organically.
You really can't. I mean, it's lightning in the bottle when you find that moment in your life, whether, because it's like, like any athlete, that's a bottled time that you're going to have that fire to do something like that. But you've pushed it into so many different areas, whether, it's following the elites or, half past first cast. How many more places would you like to connect with that? Like, do you have some dream areas that you'd like to create for vacation destinations?
I think I would like to have a lodge in Canada that we worked with. We get a lot of inquiries about sort of a fly-in type of deal. And we took a group to Lake of the Woods a few years ago, and it didn't really work out, deal with the lodge. We are starting to explore a partnership with Gros Savon in Louisiana, which is probably the best numbers bass fishing I've ever experienced in my life. It's an oil lease and rice farm down in South Louisiana. I've been there twice to fish now. And we went on an October day when it was 40-mile-an-hour winds and freezing cold. And Hannah caught 2 fish before we launched the boat off the dock. And I think we caught like 101 that day. And And then last year at the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame banquet, we bought a trip there to go fishing for a day, and we caught another 100 fish, and then alligator hunting for a day.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
we went down, we killed 9 alligators. I'm not a hunter at all, and she had never hunted at all. And it was cool. Like to see her say, when we'd come up to the baited hook, she said, I want to shoot this one. I want to shoot this one. So we're trying to work something out with them. They have world-class duck hunting. They have bass fishing. They have saltwater fishing. We're taking a group down Memorial Day. I think we still have some spaces on that. If people are interested, we'd love to take people down. And they have great, as anyone who's been to South Louisiana knows, unbelievable food and hospitality down there too. So we'll probably add a few more after we retire in 2 years. But at this point, we don't want to book trips to places we haven't been that we don't know are world-class.
So do you have to go down there? Like, what do you want to do? Like perfect world. You go down there a couple of times, different times a year, just to kind of get a vibe for the place. Like, what is that approach you take?
I think I'm pretty good at getting a feel for a place if I go there once or twice. You can go there when the fishing is off. You can go there when the fishing is better than expected. We took my brother and his business school friends went to Guatemala with us in November, and none of these guys had ever fished for sailfish before. And they caught 81 in 3 days.
Dang.
They had like 35 the first day, and they're like, this is great. And I'm like, guys, it's not always this easy. Like I've been down here when we caught 5 a day instead of 27 a day. But it's a lot of pressure. You feel like you want your client, you sold them on this is the best sail fishing in the world, or topwater tuna is the best thing there is. And then you get there and you're like, holy crap, they better bite this week. Like I've built this up so much. So we try only to go to places where we know they're going to have an exceptional experience all around. We've been to some places where the fishing was good, but the service didn't live up to it. And I just can't sell that.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. But yeah, that's such an interesting thing because, like you said, you can't guarantee the fish will be there because it's fishing. So that whole process of vetting a place, that's fascinating to me because I don't know a lot of people that do what you do.
There are some bigger agencies out there that do it, but and I guess I assume there are. I think we're the only ones in this area who do it, and I kind of feel like we know a lot of people through the bass fishing community, or we did historically in this area, and I feel like talking to someone about these places is important because anyone can sell you on a trip, take your money, and then you never see them again. But I feel like we have to live up to a certain reputation in this area because if we don't sell the best possible product, it'll come back to bite us in the butt. Yeah.
Do you think snakehead will ever be one of those things, even though it's like it's in your backyard, so sometimes people don't think of it that way? Will be a destination fish because Steve Chaconis, he's talked about this where he'd have people fly in because they want to catch this elusive creature.
Well, I have a problem as a guy who's not out on the river a lot that I invariably have someone every year who wants to fly in and catch a snakehead.
Really?
Every year, just about. And I tell my friend Clifford Weedman, who used to work for Kistler Rods and then worked for Stanley Lures, and now works at Tackle Addict at Sam Rayburn. I said, my snakehead guide service is closed because it's a lot of pressure. Like I don't know if Steve feels it, but when you go out and someone spent a lot of money to be there or spent their time and they have expectations of things being easy, it's easy to catch a snakehead when you're not trying. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's pretty hard when I'm trying. The first year Clifford came, he came right after ICAST and we fished 2 days. And the first day, I think he had 4 bites and lost them all. And I couldn't sleep that night. Like I was like, this dude flew all the way from Texas to catch a snakehead, and he's going to have to go home and tell everyone that Pete's the worst guide in the world. He doesn't know his ass from second base, etc. And then the second day, the wind blew like crazy, and we just tucked into Quantico and we stayed there all day, and we caught 3 giants. And I felt like I need to retire while I'm still pitching a perfect game at this point. Then I ran a camera boat. I used to work for Meat Eater. I was writing for them for a while. That's a long story of how I got canceled there. But
got canceled.
I wrote something that was admittedly offensive. But they had their TV show. They brought Christine Fisher here, and she filmed a show on the Potomac, and we filmed for 2 days, her and her kayak. And then it was supposed to end at 3:00 the second day, and she hadn't caught one. And we stayed out an extra hour, and she caught one finally at like 4:00 the second day. But I felt like, here we are. Pete's leading them to different areas, back at Chickamuxon, back at Quantico, back at Mattawoman. And again, the pressure falls on me. I know I couldn't be a fishing guide. I just you have to be able to kind of. It's like being an NFL defensive back. Someone scores a touchdown on you, you have to be able to brush it off and think you're going to defend the next one. I would feel ruined if people came here and didn't catch a fish.
It's hard. I mean, it's really hard to become a guide, and you have to not guarantee fish, but every day comes down to, can you actually make a creature bite and commit? And then that is what your livelihood is based on. And the snakehead, you're right, it's gotten so much media attention. It's fascinating to see how that has evolved from an invasive to like a cult following fish, to where, you'll have fishing on the B side, different people come here. And of course, like meat eaters come here a couple of times to do articles with them, which is fascinating. I heard they're pretty hardcore to work for though, too.
Meat eater?
Yeah.
When I first got there, it was Joe Cermelli, who had been at Field and Stream for many years. Mm-hmm. Joe is like one of the coolest guys in the
rock
industry.
Star.
Like, here's what's cool about Joe Cermelli is that he could be in Australia tomorrow marlin fishing. Like, someone's going to call him up, but he would rather be chasing bowfin in the swamps of New Jersey. Like, he's so authentic and like so many like he likes to go to garage sales and get old taxidermy and stuff like that. So he brought me on. And he's like, you can do whatever you want. Like, we did an article with Dave Mercer and a couple other people. Our fat guy's better jig fisherman. That was the whole theme of the article. Like, because you're slow, you're lazy,
that is
whatever.
So awesome.
And we had fun. But then, like, I got the feeling as it moved on that Meat Eater wanted to feed the algorithm. And they wanted to know, like, what are the 3 crankbaits I should throw in the spring? What's a good way to fish lily pads in the summer? And it stopped being as fun.
It's hard with any business, whether it's bass or meat eater, when it's like art and corporate in that blend. Because, people said this about Silicon Valley, like you'll get people with really good ideas. And at first it is an art what they're doing, but then it slowly gets over corporatized and sanitized. And you kind of lose that, what made it the way it was at the beginning. And you see this a lot of people in grassroots when they're small business versus when they get bigger and bigger. It's hard to keep that.
I think that's one huge advantage I have. I'm the only senior writer at Bass who's not a full-time writer. I'm one of the few guys on the board of the Bass Fishing Hall of Fame who's not full-time in the fishing industry. So I feel like that's a disadvantage a lot, because you get an invite to go to a media event at Okeechobee or at the California Delta. I can't do it. I've got to work that week. So that's the disadvantage. The advantage is I'm not depending on it for my livelihood. I can choose which assignments to take, which ones not to take. And I would never do it, but I can walk away at any time. When it stops being fun, I can walk away. So the advantage to having it be the side hustle is I can take chances. I can try to make it fun, and I can do what I want to do. And if it falls apart, that's entirely on me. If Bass doesn't want to hire me, I feel like every time I've made the choice to do something cool, do something a little bit outside the box or fun, it's benefited me in the long run. And when I've done the normal stuff, you might get a paycheck, but you don't get that high.
Subconsciously, it has to make it so you make the good decisions, because you're fishing sort of clean at that point, because it's not your money. Like, so people will talk about that in professional fishing, where like if somebody pays your way, you're not worried about eating the next day. So you're going to fish clean. Your mind is clear. And if you're not worried, like I have to take every single job when you write, that's got to change the way you approach writing an article. And, maybe I shouldn't say this. And you don't trust your gut anymore on what should be genuine.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I do best when I trust my gut. And I've taken some chances. I've gotten screamed at by some fishermen. I've gotten screamed at by some editors. But for the most part, I think I care about the sport. This, like for you, you're spending your time today doing this because it's what you want to do. And the authenticity comes through. Mm-hmm. And when you're authentic about doing something, you're doing it for the right reasons. I have plenty of articles that have gotten minimal acclaim that I've been thrilled by, and plenty of articles people have really liked that I've said, okay, you have to do it for you eventually.
You do. No, anything in life has to be for you. And I honestly, I'll also be remiss. And guys, I know we go down rabbit holes. That's what I really love about these conversations. What have you seen evolve with the classic in general? You've made all of the classics. Has it hit its peak? Are they all just as good as they were in yesteryears?
It's become bigger and bigger, obviously. I'll tell a story. So the first classic, I mentioned to you that I went to an invitational in 1994, and that's where it started. But it actually started before that. When I was in college, I was home for break, and I went to the Richmond Classic the third day when Rick Clunn won on the James, 1990. He pulls out the big bag. I know nothing about bass fishing at this point, but again, I went down, I checked it out. It still felt like a very regional, provincial sort of thing. Now, when you go to a classic and you see Taku's fans there waving the Japanese flag, you see Carl has 30 people from Australia who've come to see him, you're like, I'm at something bigger than me. I'm at a real sporting event for the first time, and that's good and it's bad. It's good because I think these guys are, for lack of a better term, athletes, and the difficulty of what they do should be recognized. It's bad because there are more demands on their time. I used to be able to, I try to go out with someone now that I'm not on the water every day. I try to go out on practice day. So like last year I went with Kyle Patrick. I don't know who I'll go out with this year on the practice day. It feels like you get less and less of that time with the guys just kind of being there. Like it's more of a business obligation for them. And that's what we want out of the sport, right? We want professionals to be recognized as the best in the world, not as guys who are, plumbers and engineers on the weekdays and happen to show up for this big tournament once a year. So
yeah, that's interesting because it's becoming more. And the analogy I've heard, and for the lack of the better, it's like NASCAR, where you have these teams and you have the drivers, and they're sponsored by Ford and Chevy because of how much sponsorship money now really kind of they need it to survive. You can't do it just on winnings. And what is fishing going to look like in 10 years when it comes to the money involved and how much things, Lord knows how many memes have been made on boats costing, some GDP of African countries right now. It's insane. Where do you think it's going?
I don't know. I listened to you talking to Lynn the other day, and you talked about the golden age of bass fishing. And were we in a golden age in 1990 and 2000, whatever? And I don't know. It's hard for me to compare eras because if you remember back in the ESPN years, every angler complained, ESPN doesn't understand fishing. They don't understand that we're not NASCAR. They can't fit us into that model. They're trying to fit us in square peg into a round hole. Now you hear those same guys saying, man, we didn't know how good we had it when ESPN was there and they were pumping big bucks into it. So are we experiencing growing pains now? Yeah. Are we becoming a more professional sport? Yeah. The nice thing about our sport historically was that Bass Club Pete can get in the boat with Kevin Van Dam. Mm-hmm. But we've moved beyond that at this point. So we may be in another golden era for all we know, where we're seeing, we're learning more about fish than ever before. And maybe the magic's going away. I don't know. I hate to prejudge that. I hate to be the old guy yelling at clouds saying, it was better when I was a kid, because that first tournament I went to in 1994, some guy won $9,000 in a 17-foot green Ranger that he couldn't tow home because he had to tow home another boat. There were 20 guys who could make a good living at it then. We have too many guys now, but a lot more than 20 can make a living doing this.
Yeah, and that's interesting because people say, well, we have too many people right now. And that's an interesting thought because it's like, do you cut it in half? Do you monopolize the industry, so to speak, with one tour, what have you? And I don't know the right answer to that because, again, it comes down to, I think it's a multitude of factors. It's never one thing. It's never one thing. Sponsors are really putting all of their resources into a few bowls, and part of it has to do with social media. That's just the fact of it is. With YouTube and the rise of it, it comes down to like views. And do I put it to the guy that wins a tournament and he is on Bassmaster Live 2 days, day 3, day 4, or the guy that does have 500,000 followers? And it's interesting now that you're seeing some of the big names, they're becoming almost TV brands in of themselves. You look at it like a Jacob Wheeler is a classic example on the BPT side, or a Scott Martin. They basically have their own studio that follows them around everywhere they go. It's fascinating to see that evolution, at least, where it's almost like if Bill Dance, when he was competing, he also had a camera for his TV show right there as well. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's bad that we have to compete on public waters because it puts a lot of factors into play in terms of spectators getting in your way or recreational anglers getting in your way. But at the same time, it means that you own all of your footage as an angler. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure every shot LeBron James has taken since he was 13, we can watch on video from 12 different angles, right? Every shot. We have all of his footage through high school, through 20 years of the pros. We don't have that from the first 40 Classic winners. We don't have all of their moments. Like, that's lost to time. I mean, the Jim Bitter fish going over the side of the James River, we only have that because he was leading. If he had been coming from behind and lost that fish, it would have been a good story, but it wouldn't be as meaningful. So now we have the opportunity for both the league and the individual to tell their own story. And I think that's a win for us. I mean, the only way it's a loss for me is I have a limited amount of time every week to watch YouTube videos, and I have to pick and choose what I really want to see.
Do you have any like moments that really stand out to you when you were on the water covering?
Anything with Van Dam, just because to have the chance to watch someone who's the best at what they did and watch him make it look so effortless and effortless and at the same time put so much energy. Like, I once heard one of the wives describe him as a poodle on crack, but I think of Van Dam as like a coiled serpent. Like, watching him cast a jerkbait further than anyone else, it's amazing because he's not necessarily stronger. He just like, there was all that tensed up energy there. So watching him do that, the moment I really think of, and it involves Van Dam, is the 2011 Classic in New Orleans, because we were there in Catawatchee and all the leaders were there. So Van Dam is there, Aaron Martins is there, Scott Rook is there, Boyd Duckett is there, Palaniuk, who we didn't know who he was at that point, is there. And they're all fishing for the same fish, and you realize the guys are slightly better or they fish differently. Like, Derek Remitz would catch a fish. You didn't know he had one on. Like, he's just barely cranking the reel handle with it like this, with the rod tip down, and suddenly he lands a fish. Whereas Palaniuk at 100 yards away is jumping up on the back deck, jumping to the front deck, leaning down, pulling over. Like, they're skinning a cat, but there's two different ways to do it.
Yeah.
And it was just cool because we get very little of that in this sport, where guys can spread out over 100 miles of water to see all the leaders sort of in the same stadium at one point.
Yeah, dude, that's got to be cool to actually watch that. What stood out to you with the way he fished, Kevin Van Dam?
I just think he was so aggressive. And what I practiced with him once at the California Delta for 3 days. So here's the story. I won't get into the backstory, but someone introduces me to Kevin. I'm going to fish as a co-angler on the Delta. So I call him up. Hey, Kevin, we met through Mike. Do you think I could practice with you? He says, sure. So we practiced the first day. And he says, are you practicing with someone tomorrow? And I said, well, I'm supposed to practice with so-and-so. He says, look, if you practice with me, you got to practice with me the whole time, because I don't like any information getting out. So I'm like, greatest angler of all time says you have to practice with me for all 3 days. Yes, I will take that for sure. But I'm sitting here and I'm looking at my desk. Here's a red-eye shad that I stole out of Kevin's boat that day because it hadn't been introduced yet. But most of the fish he caught that week were flipping. And I've been in the boat with Denny Brower. I've been around Tommy Biffle. I've seen all the great flippers. And Kevin can flip just as well as any of them. But you don't think of him as a flipper. Like, you think of him throwing a crankbait, a spinnerbait, and a jerkbait. And I think back to, you probably don't remember this before your time, when they had the E50 tournaments. Mm-hmm. And he, on Lake Louisville, caught the lake record 11-pounder with a shaky head.
With a shaky head.
So good at so many things. And if you just take the TV narrative, it's Kevin fishes fast and he fishes with hard baits or a spinnerbait. And to see him do other things was to realize that's kind of the transition moment. Because there was a moment in the 90s where you could be just a cranker. You could be just a flipper. But I think what Kevin heralded for the sport was the moment where you had to be able to do everything well to be competitive consistently.
And I really... And, when this airs, comment section, let me know how wrong I'm here. I think he was like that first generation to do that multi-tool athlete, so to speak, for fishing. Because then I think, like you could say, Jacob Wheeler then just took it to the next level where, he'll do it in any format, don't matter, whatever. He'll figure it out with forward-facing sonar, without forward-facing sonar. And it's fascinating to see, like, these anglers progress in I don't know, quality. It's... Because I remember when I was a kid watching, and you could kind of tell the age of most of the anglers. And now it looks like, have you graduated middle school yet, sir? Because it's insane. Like, some of these guys are so polished, and it's not about, I'm not saying there's no knock on being young. It's just how good some of these kids are is insane.
I want to know what kid has like the opportunity to fish 200 days a year. Like, even if I had known about it back then, I wouldn't have had the chance I guess it's no different than if you're a basketball player playing on an AAU team or a wrestler who's traveling to tournaments,
Bingo.
like it's become routinized and institutionalized in a good way, where these kids can go out and really get top-notch instruction.
Well, I mean, Northern Virginia, because this is what I did for 16 years before I switched careers, which was baseball and coaching. And, parents would spend an ungodly amount for travel baseball and everything, and to get them polished up at a young age. I'm talking before middle school. And now they have middle school teams that will feed into high school, that'll feed into your college. And, credit to credit's due with Bass and what FLW did back in the day. They planted the seeds. I'll be back, 2010-ish for high school fishing and college. And now it is pretty much like what college football is to the NFL. It just produces some massive sticks.
And I'll admit I was wrong on that. I really thought college and high school fishing were bad things at the time. I thought, here's what's going to happen. You're going to have the dad who buys his kid a 20-foot boat with a 250 on the back with everything available. and he goes out and he kicks ass because he has the best information, the best equipment. Some other kid mows lawns all summer, has enough to buy a John boat with a 9.9 on the back. He works his butt off, doesn't have the same advantages, gets discouraged and leaves. And I'm sure that happened at times. I thought that was going to be the dominant paradigm. The dominant paradigm is that these teams have found ways to really make it work for these kids. And they've produced incredible anglers who can get out there and be fully polished by the time that they get to the pro level or to the AAA level. And so I'll admit I was wrong on that one.
I think your two things can be true. Like, there's an issue where you'll have the trust fund kids that can do it that way. But it's the field of play doesn't change. Like, if you go to Clemson and you practice on Lake Hartwell and you did Lake Hartwell when you were in high school, why are we shocked when if we have a Bass Open at Lake Hartwell, you're going to do pretty good? Because these kids get to travel and fish these big time fisheries because it's usually, spoiler alert, the same 10 on a 3-year rotation. And if you get good at those fisheries, you have a chance at least. That is fascinating to me because I think that does play into the forward-facing sonar thing. Like, I can hear an argument there of forward-facing sonar in the youth, but it's also like if you're a Trey McKinney, you've been doing this as a sport since you were 12. Like, that's a hell of an advantage compared to individuals that didn't have that to be able to polish their skills as they approach joining the opens.
And I think the cream always rises to the top. There are plenty of kids who have every advantage in the world and plenty of time and are never going to be as good as Trey McKinney. I was working on a piece about Jordan Lee last week, and I talked to Zona about him. And I remembered the first time I met Jordan Lee was through Zona before Jordan was old enough to drink. And Zona basically said to me last week, he's like, I've been watching Jordan since he was 18, and I knew he was an Aaron, he was a Van Dam, he was a Hackney. He was in that caliber of that special sort of gift, and clearly he had that gift or has it.
Mm-hmm. No, he does have that gift, and I don't know. It's fascinating to see, and I think what's going to happen is the sport's going to get younger. I think that's what's interesting about the technology thing is if you can't learn it, and this happens in any sport. If once the Wildcat offense came in the NFL, it took a couple of years for defenses to figure out, like with the Jaden Daniels of the world, and now like a running quarterback, you have to have. Everyone has one, but there was that time where it's like that we thought was a fad. Oh, how wrong we were. But everything evolves. And when you deal with the technology, I feel like that's kind of part of it where the younger generation, because they're not married, they don't have a business, they can sleep in a truck and they'll just dial that in. That is their advantage, I think, compared to veterans of the sport where, maybe I do have a few more obligations, or you just don't have the same fire, which honestly, I think that sometimes happens to people too.
What I worry about as a sport is because, most other sports, you have a maximum 10, 12-year lifespan of your career. But if you're in the NBA or the NFL, you make enough money in those 10 or 12 years to last you a lifetime. I worry that because there's not as much money in this sport and because there's so many people taking a piece of the pie, that the constant infusion of young people pushing out the older people will lead to a place where we just never have established stars again. And I feel like to some extent that's sort of my job as a writer is to take the Trey McKinneys and humanize them. We talked about that earlier, but to find a way where I don't know. I don't know how there's so much demand. I think Bass could say we have a 20 tournament EQ schedule this year with a $7,000 entry fee, and people would fill their field. There's such a demand to be a pro angler at this point, and I don't know that there are enough pieces of pie out there to feed all the pro anglers or all the people who want to be one.
I think you're right. I I think you're right. Unless there's some kind of massive TV deal, Budweiser deal, like the big four sports have, I don't know how you rebalance that thing. And it's interesting when you talk about career length, because I don't know. I go both ways on this, because I see when older pros were getting upset about the kids and everything, and it's about, well, my job's in jeopardy. And to me as an athlete, 3 reconstructive shoulder surgeries, was going to get drafted before I blew my arm out. Being an athlete means like it's a gift, and you're on borrowed time. And that's what makes it cool when you have a Brett Favre, a Cal Ripken, somebody that just, a Rick Klung, for God's sakes, that can do it. That shouldn't be the norm, because it doesn't make it special.
Right.
But again, what is the time frame?
I don't know. I don't know if there's a magic number length for a career. I mean, what Klun did, when you think about it, to be 70, I'm 50, almost 55. Like, I couldn't get up, drive 15 hours, fish 6 days in a row, drive another 15 hours to the next one and do it again. Like, forget about bucking the waves. Forget about being competitive. What he did is nothing short of a miracle. And I don't know how you tell a non-fishing audience that, how you tell that story to someone who doesn't get it. But that's what our sport needs to figure out how to do. I don't think we'll ever be one of the big four sports, but to get a slightly bigger piece of that pie, a slightly wider audience, including people who don't fish, we have to be able to tell that story better.
Do you think sports gambling will start entering into the equation at some point? I feel like its fingers are everywhere in sports.
I don't know. I'm not a gambler. I don't know. You look at the NFL, and for so long they were anti-gambling. And now obviously the fact that you have so many people betting on, is the coin going to come out a certain way, who's going to receive, et cetera, keeps people tuned to the games, right? So it boosts their TV numbers. I don't know. What would you bet on in fishing?
That's what you tell the people in Vegas to figure out. I know with the fantasy fishing and everything else like that. And to me, it's just interesting to see this evolution, because they know, like, okay, we can fight this, but it's a revenue source. And it's like, is that something that an organization can figure out? And again, I know there's efficacy and things like that, but to create more revenue streams. But yeah, it was just, I didn't know if you heard of anything about that. But yeah, that's interesting to see how that all evolves. Now, I did want to ask you on the Rick Klun thing. Were you there at any of his wins on the St. John's?
Yes. So this is like another, I talked about riding the bus with Stillwater, how you have to be there. All the random things that have happened to me in my life. So I get invited to a media event in a town called Adel, Georgia, at this private quail plantation that has 9 lakes in it. And like Aaron Martins was there, Brent Chapman was there, Adrian Avina, Fred Rumbanis. And so I got to get there on my own. And they're all coming from the St. John's. So I could either fly into Tallahassee or Jacksonville. And Tallahassee was closer, but I think Jacksonville I could get a direct flight. So I flew to Jacksonville on day 4 of the first one that Klun won. And he's in the lead. And I'm like, I got to be in Adel, Georgia tonight, but I'll be damned if I'm not going to go down to Palatka, Florida first. So I drive down on day 4 and watch Klun weigh in. And Klun is someone who I regret that I didn't get to know better as a writer. I've been in the boat with him once. I'm fascinated by every aspect of him. But to watch the amount of respect that he got that day, like, when guys are done on day 3 or day 2, they go home, everyone waited around. Skeet Reese met him at the dock and carried his bag up the ramp for him. Like, to watch the amount of respect he got, again, that's the other story I want to tell. Like, people knew how special it was. They didn't know he was going to win again 3 years later. But to have been there for that as a part-timer who feels a certain amount of imposter syndrome about his place in the fishing industry, like, I was like, I nailed that. And then I got to go fishing in Georgia for 4 days or 3 days, however long it was.
That's so freaking cool. What was the most magical place that you went on the tour?
California Delta is the coolest place I've been. I mean, especially for a tidal water guy like myself. But it doesn't set up like a river, because it's all sorts of sloughs and little lakes and backwaters and stuff like that. And I got to fish there with David Wharton. I got to fish there with Denny. I practiced there for 3 days with Van Dam. No, wait, I take that back. I fished the famous event at Falcon too.
Oh, really?
And so at Falcon, I caught what was then my personal best the last day of the tournament. It was an 8-12 fishing with Marty Stone. But the first 5 days I was there, 3 days of practice and 2 tournament days, my partner, who I fished with 5 different guys, caught one over 9 every day. Like, and when you're a kid from Virginia, you see a couple 9s in your lifetime, maybe, but to see one every day. And I practiced one of the days with Jeff Crete, and he had to make a phone call at one point. And he pulled up on a point and he said, "You can fish there." And like the first 4 casts, I catch a 2-pounder each cast. And I'm like, "Jeff, it's a tournament. Do you want me to pull off these fish?" He goes, "Catch as many of those as you want, because they're not going to help me at all in the tournament. If I'm fishing for 2-pounders in this event, I'm completely trick screwed." So I sat and I caught like 30, and then we left.
Was that the heyday of those places?
That was when Falcon, no one knew what it was really about. And Greg Hackney told a friend of mine, he's like, "They're going to Falcon next year. And if you can get in as an amateur, that's the one to get in on." He's like, "No one really knows about it. It's going to be good. The water's been fluctuating for years, so it's in its prime right now." Like Trip Weldon told people, if your fish is not at least 10 pounds, don't bother weighing it in for big fish. My first day, I drew Brent Chapman. I think he had 32, and I had 17. And then Brent's dad was fishing as a co-angler. He fished with Velvik, and I think his dad had 30 and Velvik had 40. And then the second day I fished with Yusuke Miyazaki, and he had 30 pounds. And the third day I fished with Marty Stone, who was really struggling, and I had like 23 pounds, including that 812 by like 9 o'clock. And after that, and he was struggling, getting frustrated. And after that, I said, "Marty, just like, do your thing. I'm just going to sit here." And like occasionally I'd flip a worm out of the back. And I think I culled a couple times just flipping a worm out the back. But I think it took 25 pounds a day to make the top 50 cut. It was just insane.
I just wonder if those fisheries will ever come back, because it's weird to be, again, a young guy, but then we're talking about the glory days of Amistad and Falcon and that whole chain. And I don't know, and even Clear Lake, like I still remember listening into that, like Mark Jeffries telling his story of watching Kennedy and all them catch just dinosaurs out there. Like there's so many cool fisheries in this country that you really get very few glimpses of.
Yeah. And I have to say that you were asking about favorite experiences I've watched, and your mention of Kennedy. If you've ever seen the video of him catching him, he's just so happy.
Oh yeah.
And I remember the Conroe Classic. Everyone else would be like throwing fish in the live well. He's showing them to the camera. He's happy. He's saying, "Where do you want it?" Like, if you've never been around the Kennedy family, the whole world would be a better place if everyone was like the Kennedys. They're the most amazing family. And I've spent a decent amount of time. I've been to their cabin at Lake Martin and fished with them for a couple days. And they're just the coolest people. And like, my biggest fear is that I get out on tour in 2 years, traveling with the elites, and all the guys I know are gone. Like, I hope Steve Kennedy is still there, because I want more days in the boat with someone who loves to fish. Like, he's out there because he loves it.
When you talk about the love of fishing, and again, I think it just feeds off the Lynn conversation I had when it comes to Japanese anglers, and that breath of fresh air, I think, that came in here, because it seems like a lot of times with American companies nowadays, the innovation is gone, but then you look at a lot of those companies and anglers, and it's just like they're as sharp as a tack. Everything is how do we make it bigger, faster, stronger, better? Crazy ideas. Let's just make this a hentai blob and it's going to sell as a bait. Let's do that. And every angler over there, it's in baseball. It reminds me a lot of baseball, where the pitchers and the hitters that come out from over there, their mechanics are so insanely tight and clean. Every one, not a blemish. And you're seeing that in fishing.
Absolutely. Like, my brother speaks fluent Japanese. Like, and
really?
He lived in Japan for 10 years. So I went over in 2007 when I was just getting into the writing thing. And I knew Matt Pano, who owns Optimum Swim Baits, and he imports Depths and Ima Lures and a couple others. So Matt took me to the Yokohama Tackle Show. And then we spent a day with the guys from Lure Magazine. We hit 7 tackle shops in a day around Tokyo. And
oh my God, dude, that is so cool.
Imagine going into a shop, like a decent sized tackle shop, and you've never seen 3/4 of the things. And I didn't have money then. Like, I had money, but like not, I wasn't willing to spend a couple $1,000 on fishing tackle. And for all your listeners, you asked me earlier, like, what are some places you want to go? I want to do a trip, and I've talked to the guys at Sunline about this, and I'm hoping to talk to the guys at Megabass in 2027, a Japan trip, where like you go to one of the tackle shows, spend a couple days tackle shopping, and then a couple days on Biwa. Like, I have
Oh
no
my
idea
God,
what it
yes.
would cost, but it would be the most badass trip ever. Because, like you said, everything they do there, they do to the nth degree, whether it's the tackle, whether it's the guys in the ramen shop who are running around to get your bowl of ramen for no tip. Like, it's just a cool place. And the fact that so here's the deal. My brother knows nothing about fishing, but he speaks fluent Japanese. So he goes there pretty regularly for business, and I watch his dog all the time. So, like, I'll watch his dog for a couple of weeks and stuff. And invariably I tell him, do not bring me anything. If you see a fishing magazine, bring me that. And invariably he goes to a tackle shop while he's there, and he asks the guy, what can I get my brother? I want to spend $100. I want to spend $200. And he'll send me this beautifully packaged bag of Japanese tackle. And sometimes it's really cool stuff. And sometimes it's like, what the hell is this? Like, I want to go and do my own shopping again. I don't know what I would spend. My friend Hideki Maeda, who makes Teckle lures, he makes the Sprinker and the Kick Knocker and all of those baits. He had Ish fly over there. Ish flew over for 2 days, said, I don't want to see any sights. I don't want to do anything. I just want to go tackle shopping. And that's all they did. And I could see myself doing that. Like, my wife wasn't into, I have the best pictures of her somewhere, of her standing in a tackle shop in Tokyo, just looking like the most miserable person on earth. And now that she fishes, I think it would be a different experience. But at the time, she was miserable and I was in absolute heaven.
Well, if you have that trip planned, let me know, because I will figure out a way to scrum up some money and I'll promote the hell out of that. That's a great idea.
Yeah, I think it would be pretty cool to get to go to some of the factories, do some tackle shopping, and go fishing on Biwa.
So if people want to follow you or they want to book a trip, what trips do you have coming up first? And then we can promote your next article.
Sure. We have, we're going to Gros Savon, Louisiana for bass and or redfish in May. I think we have some spaces for that. Then we have a trip next February that I think has some space to go to Guatemala sail fishing. We're looking for groups of 2 or 4 for that trip. We have a boat of 2 right now that's looking to add 2, and we have another boat available for 4 people. We have next year topwater popping for tuna in Panama, which I love all the trips, but that one's particularly special for a bass guy. And we have an Alaska trip next summer. And Mexico, we can send people to Mexico at any time. We can send people anytime. Those are the trips that we will be hosting this year.
That's awesome.
And, we're always happy to answer questions. Our website is halfpastfirstcast.com, and the email is fishmore@halfpastfirstcast.com.
Awesome stuff. And then what do you got coming up with the Classic and everything?
It's weird. Now that I'm not on the water, I get to search out whatever articles. A couple years ago when Gussie was leading on the 3rd day, I corralled his wife and I sat down with her and I said, what does the wife of the Classic leader do on the last day? And we just kind of went over that. And they roomed with Jason Christie and his wife. So Jason's wife obviously had been through it the year before. That was his fiance at the time. I like finding sort of those off the wall stories, someone who I'm going to ride with on practice day who may be a dark horse, or someone who, maybe a Greg Hackney who's fished 20 classics and has won a Forest Wood Cup, but not a classic. What does it mean to him at 50 years old? I want to find that human interest story. I will do analysis every day and probably some shorter articles, but my goal of every classic is to come out with one article that I'm really proud of, where I felt like I told a story that no one else could tell.
Pete, I really appreciate your time coming on the show and telling some just a thin veil of the stories that you have to offer. Again, guys, link in the episode description to everything that we talked about today. I'll link everything so you can check out some of his articles and also book a amazing trip. Go take a fishing vacation. You only live once. Go around this sun one time. Pete, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I'm always happy to talk fishing, and you make it easy.
Thanks. As always, guys, link in the episode description, everything we talked about today, and we'll see you guys next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.